suppose when I think about this, I also think about advisors and their role. So we recently did a survey, well, earlier this year, our Voice of the Advisor survey, and in it we asked them, topics or things that clients were asking about. Like, what are some of the top three things that you're being asked about? Cryptocurrencies were up there, right? It's something that they're everywhere. Clients are very well aware of them. They see, that 20x gain in a very short time, and they want to be a part of it. Uh, for advisors, it's sort of an area of uncertainty, especially if you're an advisor who's been in the industry for decades. You've become used to doing things a certain way. And change for anyone can be scary, but particularly when it's your business and when you've done something a certain way and it's worked very well, it's very difficult to now change that process and to introduce, sort of this new asset class. I was having a conversation with someone recently about this, and he said something really interesting, and that is, even though Bitcoin is struggling right now, advisors should never be the ones to saying, "I told you so," because at the end of the day, what did you really tell your clients about it? Besides the fact that this was something new, you weren't sure, it made you uncomfortable. And when I look at all of this, I sort of compare it to the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s. I mean, I was too young to have actually, observed the whole thing. But what I will say is that based on my understanding of it, you, the internet remained. So even though all those different businesses that were on there that crashed, I think like pet.com was one of them, the underlying foundation, which was the internet, it's what we use now. It never went away, and that's sort of how I view blockchain. And yes, there are some bad coins out there. There's a lot of speculation. There's coins that don't have much behind them except they're just trying to be a part of the hype. But I go back to, if you want to play very safe, what will last? And to me, the thing that will last is the blockchain. So even if you don't want to invest in, let's say, a crypto fund or cryptocurrencies directly, you can invest in companies that are in the blockchain space or companies that enable investors to, buy different cryptos. So like it might be a platform, it might be a firm that, creates different technology to enable crypto. So, what would your advice be for advisors on how they should look at all of this?
So my advice is, as every advisor needs to know, is know the parameters of what their client is trying to achieve. Right. So understanding the client and what is their spectrum from a asset allocation perspective, timeline perspective, what is their knowledge base. Don't put someone into something that is speculative. Don't put someone. This isn't gambling, right? This is holding an asset and understanding what the validation of that asset is and what the verification of that asset is and what is the true outcome of that asset. And it's multiple assets. So I'll give you my thought process. 35, 40 years ago, there was traditional mutual funds. And you're saying to yourself, okay, I'm willing to give up a contribution level and I'll give it over to a portfolio manager. And that portfolio manager understands an asset mix or an equity mix that will hopefully give me a rate of return. And for that rate of return, you're going to give them a fee. Okay? And that was in a structured product. Okay? That structured product manifested into a public product, a public structured product, which was an exchange traded funds. First, it was in a passive investment, i.e., I wish to get broad exposure on the TSX 60 or the S&P 500, or as it evolved, it would be on oil or gas, or on a commodity, gold, or on a fixed income instrument. And the delivery mechanism was the ETF. It was just a contractual prospectus saying, I'm willing, the company being the asset manager, to give you an exposure. I'll hold the underlying exposure. You will own a fractional amount of that exposure, and we'll deliver you an outcome. And in my mind, that was actually the precursor of what even the blockchain is. Because what happened in that time period is we kind of bifurcated and took away all these siloed asset allocated tools into one unified delivery mechanism, which was the ETF. Now we're saying, you know what, I don't even need the ETF. I'm willing to do it on a sovereignty or person perspective and take a digital coin into my own wallet. I don't need someone else to do it on my behalf. Where I think a wealth or advisor can add value is the selection process, the verification process, and really working with the regulators. And I am a big advocate of the Ontario Securities Commission, the CSA guidelines, the SEC's efforts. But what they need to do from a regulatory perspective is seeing all the kind of bureaucracy and making sure that there's an efficiency model that is brought out on the documentation of regulatory policies and procedures. That's their effort contribution. The effort contribution on an advisor is to say, okay, I see all these different asset classes, and now there's this new digital asset class. How do I allocate appropriately to you? You're a young individual who didn't live through, the dot-com period. I did. How do I know which is the right company through that dot-com period to select? Before there was, Facebook, there was MySpace, right? And there's going to be an evolution, right? There is going to be Bitcoin. I don't know necessarily Bitcoin is going to be the only stored value coin or digital asset for the future. There might be something else. Why do I say that? Well, it was initially brought out, in 2011, 2012, right? It has a level of cost from a construction or minting of that coin or hash rate. There's a level of cost from a transactability perspective and time. It's not that, it takes time to do each block. So does a company like Cordero, Avalanche, Solana, Stellar, those foundational Ripple may come with lower gas fees, lower hash rate production, facilitation might be better, on-chain and off-chain results might be better. All of those things are going to come through this development over the next 10, 15 years. It took us 25 years to get to $1 trillion in the ETF market, right? It only took us 4 or 5 to get us to $1 trillion in the digital asset space.